Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Beyond Influence. This is Kwame. Today, we are very lucky to have a very special guest with us today. Welcome to the show, Jade Beason. How are you?
Hi. Yeah, I'm really, really good. I'm very excited to be on the show, to have a chat. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks for joining. It was funny. I was talking with Kwame, and we spend so much time talking to creators, and we're like, we need to bring on a creator who supports creators and just talk about, someone who's also trying to lift up creators, provide resources while being a creator. And, we're going through YouTube and saw your channel and everything you've done over the last 8 years. And we're just super inspired. So I would love for you to share a little bit about your journey, what your mission is with your channel, with your content, and then dive into it.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually started my YouTube journey 4 years ago now. It was in November 2020. I think we all remember what was happening back then. It was a very weird time. We had a lot more time on our hands than we usually do. So therefore, I started a YouTube channel. But the reason why I started a YouTube channel and started in the niche that I did, which is primarily teaching others about social media marketing and entrepreneurship, was because that was very much my background. So you mentioned the 8 years. That was my 8 years marketing experience. I studied marketing. I have a few different qualifications in marketing. And there was a point where I had a few other businesses on the side as well. And I remember I would go to YouTube to learn, as a lot of people do. And I would see content from others within my niche, but they rarely looked like me, being a Black woman, sounded like me, being from the UK. It was so difficult for me to find someone who I felt like represented me on those levels. And I knew that I had experience that I could share. So I just thought, you know what, I know that I can be that person for someone else. So I started sharing content, and then things very much snowballed, as they tend to do when you are from a marketing and business background. You can make things happen super, super quickly. And I quit my job 6-ish months after my first ever video went live. And I've been working for myself ever since. So in terms of my mission, I kind of alluded to it, but I was able to do this so quickly. And the reason why was because I have a background in marketing and business. And something that I've learned from speaking and working with so many creators is that there are so many creators who produce far better, more complex content than I ever could, but they are not earning an income from it because they don't have marketing and business knowledge. And that just doesn't seem fair. So I'm trying to plug the gap between creating that content that you absolutely love and adore and actually monetizing it and earning an income from it.
It's amazing. And selfishly, I'm very excited that our first two creators for season 2 are two Black creators. I think that's been definitely an area that I've been trying to focus a bit more on, get more representation. So we appreciate seeing you. We appreciate seeing you flourish. How, how has your journey changed since you started? What's the biggest things that you've noticed?
Yeah. Do you know what? I say this to a lot of people, especially people who are just starting out and they're like really trying to get through that initial barrier of posting that first video or first photo. I still think that was the hardest part. I don't think any challenges I faced since then have been as difficult. Like the hardest part is just starting, putting yourself out there and, having to deal with some mindset issues around, how you feel about other people and how they think about you, because we all feel that way when we first start a journey. So from that perspective, something that's changed is that has become less of a thing. I don't really think about people who I went to school with 12 years ago, and if they're watching my YouTube videos, like that's not something I think about. Even in terms of like negative feedback that you might get, I'm able to look through it and actually take the useful parts to improve my content and ignore the parts that aren't. So much confidence and just basically becoming a lot more self-assured in who I am and what I offer has come with time, for sure. And overall, I just think the journey's become a lot more enjoyable. So hopefully that makes anyone who's listening to this, who's like struggling at the minute, feeling a little bit nervous, hopefully that makes you feel a bit better, because everything, for me anyway, has generally felt easier and more enjoyable since my very first day.
I love what you said about, the hesitancy to post that first time and some of the negative feedback. What I gather from that is there's this newfound confidence that when you hear the bad comments, when you experience the reality of it and you survive it and it's not that bad, it's not this built up, overwhelming fear of something that could be. It's like, I'm on the other side of the fire. Look at me go. And I think it's this new level of achievement, new level of confidence. And I think that's really cool and inspiring because a lot of creators, and it's funny, we even, being vulnerable, we talked about the podcast, like putting ourselves out there, like I've hid in the shadows of my spreadsheets and not talked. And, putting stuff online, it's like, are we just going to get trolled? Or people going to make fun of us? Do you lose credibility? And I think what we found is people have been positive and are really supportive and trying to help creators and the brand grow. So I love that for you. I love that for other creators. It's just great.
Yeah. And do you know what? Something similar I just thought of as you were speaking as well, in terms of like with time becoming a bit more self-assured. Something else that has definitely changed over time is like, once you do this for a few years, you start to identify the seasons in like your audience and in your content. And you start to experience a few floppy moments where you're like, oh, my content's not quite performing as well as it previously did. And the first 1 or 2 times that happens, you will get in your head about it and you'll be like, well, that's it. No one cares anymore. That's my moment over. I might as well just pack my things up and just go back to my job. You will feel like that in the beginning. It's a really tough process to go through. But once you've rode that wave a few times and you've had your moments where your content isn't performing as well, and then it's gone straight back up, it makes it so much easier to deal with the next time it happens. You're like, this is just another phase. I'm going to do what I need to do to get out of it. But you'll have confidence that you will get out of it,
I love that. There's so many parallels to how I think about running a business too. It's funny because, not everything is crushing numbers and I think a lot of what you said, content, you can swap out deals or quarters or whatever kind of success looks like for you in your career. And then it's like, I call it this like blast shield. Like you develop this thick skin, this ability to absorb. And then it's like, okay, that happened. Why did it happen? And I'm going to like put my rational hat on. I'm going to like steer this way. I know how to get out of this. I'm going to pivot a little bit, or I'm going to double down and create different content or re-engage with my audience, recommit to posting more, whatever it might be that you found works. And I think it's like going through 18 of those cycles, it just creates that truly reassured confidence that you can handle those situations. I love the, like, people need to know success isn't this super linear, always on thing. Even for someone with 200,000 followers on YouTube and 4 years in the channel, it's going to have moments that kind of come and go. And I just love that. People need to hear that.
For sure.
Yeah. I think when we talk about being vulnerable and putting yourself out there and, putting your best foot forward, whichever way you want to put it, and not worrying about the negativity that comes on, I want to take a moment to commend Scott, because Scott's been really nervous about putting his musical talents on his Instagram. And that's become one thing that I actually really, really enjoy. I think being able to share your passions with people and not worry about what the negativity was going to be, I think that that's a really, really big step to take. So I don't know. I'm a big fan of it. I think that everyone should just be okay with being completely themselves, putting it out there, regardless of whether you are, somebody out on the street, somebody, nobody's ever met, or you're a CEO of a company and you're like, you know what? I can sing Adele. I'm going to put it out, play the piano, and it's going to sound good. So, I love that for you, Scott. But, with that being said, there's a lot of vulnerability that goes into putting yourself out there. Have you ever had a moment where the vulnerability hit a little too hard and you thought, uh-oh?
Such a good question. So I'm quite specific with what I share online. So you will hear about my business a lot, and you will hear about parts of my life in association to my business. So whenever I feel a little bit awkward, I guess, or I can feel a little bit nervous about sharing content, it's usually when it goes outside of those kind of parameters. So even, I got married this time last year, and even talking about my wedding, I was a bit like, oh, because I don't usually talk about my husband or I don't usually talk about my friends, stuff like that. I felt a bit awkward. I filmed a video recently where it's just about things that I've struggled with as a creator. And that was the hardest video I've ever filmed. And I haven't scheduled it yet. It will go out. I've said it out loud now, so it has to go out. It is the hardest video I've ever filmed. And I'm still just talking about my business, but I'm talking about parts of my business that I don't speak about very often. And therefore it makes me feel ever so slightly uncomfortable. I think I always highly commend creators who are vloggers or lifestyle creators who literally just showcase their life as their core theme of their content, because they have such confidence to be able to do that. And I think it's something that I and other educational creators do struggle with, because I can hide behind educational content. Like I can 100% do that. And I could use it as a barrier as well. Because I could be like, well, if all I'm sharing is strategies and someone hates a strategy, it doesn't hurt my feelings that much. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes I use that as a bit of a blanket to hide under, if I'm being honest, and I'm trying to be a lot better with it. So to answer your question, yes, but I still have some way to go, I think, when it comes to how vulnerable I actually get online.
Kwame's definitely really insecure about sharing his love life with the public, as we all know. But
yeah.
No, I think one lesson, and I would be curious if you agree with this, but it's, creating that really comfortable lane, but then it doesn't need to be these hard left turns or these huge leaps of faith. It's like exposing a little bit more of who you are around the business and kind of moving into it one little step at a time and testing the waters. And over time, it is funny because we talked about the music thing, and I deleted 8 posts before I ever put anything on there, and it's like 10 years in the making. But I'm kind of like, now I'm like, well, it's out there. If someone wants to troll me, there's like posts out in the wild, and if they really wanted to get down on me, they can. And so like one more post isn't going to change anything. And it's like, if they're going to make fun of me, they're going to make fun of me. But it's at the same time, you're like, you've already crossed that hurdle. And so I think for a lot of people, it's like, what hurdles am I comfortable crossing? What's a small hurdle? What's the next thing? And I do think it's cool. And I'd be curious your experience, but I feel like when you share those things, it goes a long way with your audience, because it's just when you expand beyond the educational content, when you show them a little bit of who you are, because they're invested in you beyond just your content.
Yeah, 100%, which is why I'm making such a conscious effort to share a little bit more. I do think, to your point, like it's okay to still, I'm always going to have boundaries in place. Like I'm not suddenly going to do up a video tomorrow where I'm like, here's my life story and this is my mum and this is where we live. Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to suddenly start doing that. But I do think there is so much power in showing who you are beyond your educational content. And that's something that I talk to a lot of other people about as well. And I think, to your point about letting, one step at a time. Previously, the way in which I do that is I really let my personality come through my educational content. And I think previously I felt like that was enough. Whereas now I'm like, no, I think it's more important to show a bit more still in relation to business. But for example, with that video, talking about things that I'm struggling with, because it's important that people realize that it's not all fairies and rainbows and amazing events and all these great brand deals. And oh my God, that looks like so much fun. It is fun, don't get me wrong, but there are parts that I really struggle with. And I think in the beginning, I was better at talking about that. And I think maybe over time, as my audience grew, maybe I stopped sharing so much of the negative stuff. So I think I'm just trying to get that balance back, It's a lot easier to be open in that way when you know that only 10 people are watching your videos. So in the beginning, that was a lot easier. Whereas now it's a bit more daunting.
Yeah. I mean, when we think about the parts of our journey, we all have our whys. And I feel like those are our biggest motivations, And I think one thing that we've been trying to do with this podcast is get a little bit deeper with creators and really get a sense of who they are. So we, prior to hitting record, we talked a tiny bit about you getting a new dog and all. Do you have anything within your story that really helps drive you that you're willing to share with us today?
Yeah, this is actually something I shared on my stories literally like a couple of hours ago, because I've got a Q&A box on my stories and I said personal questions only. So you guys will be proud of me. I'm doing it. I'm sharing more. This is more... It's basically a story that happened back in the day. It's not like a super deep or sad one. It's just more, I call it my origin story, because it was something that made me into who I am today. And I feel like I come across a lot of people who I work with now or just at events, and I just think, you are about to have something similar happen, or you feel how about yourself how I felt before this happened to me, basically. So when I was at school, I was like a very average student. I also went to a school which I didn't really, I don't want to, I mean, I'm not saying the name of the school, so I guess it's fine. It wasn't the best school in the world. It was a pretty bad school. And a lot of my teachers did not support me in any way. I would have counterparts who were different for me in certain ways, and they would get a level of support that I never did. I was very much taught from a young age at that school that I was like an average student and I was never really going to perform better than that. It was the kind of school where you felt like you were either born smart or not. And I was very much kind of told like, you're not. So that was kind of how I grew up. And therefore, how you act in regards to how hard you try at things very much stems from your own belief system. So I very much had the belief system that there's no point trying because I'm not going to do that well. And then I basically had this experience where I got a really bad result in one of my A levels, and I realized I wouldn't be able to get into uni if I didn't get my level up. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to dedicate myself to this subject. It was a history exam, and I was like, I'm going to give this everything I've got. It was the first time I realized that I really hadn't been trying very hard, and I really went for it. And then in the end, it was a written exam, and it was out of 240 marks, and I got 240 marks, and that had never happened at my school before. It was 100% on a written exam. And I was like, I didn't even make a spelling mistake. Like, what? 100% from someone who previously just did not think they were that smart. So I ended up getting that result, and I genuinely think about that experience almost every day because it changed the trajectory of my life. Suddenly I was like, wait, I'm capable of so much. I had no idea. It changed my approach to everything. I went to uni. I got a first in my uni. I used to dance when I was younger, and suddenly I became a far better dancer because I was like, oh, I've not been trying. I've been holding myself back this whole time, and I just didn't realize, And there are so many people who I meet now, who I speak to, who I just feel like are exactly how I was before that, where someone's told them something, or they've told themselves something about who they are, and they have been blindly following that belief without questioning it up until this point. They can't become a content creator because of the home that they live in. They can't become a content creator because they don't know how to edit their videos. But we can all learn to edit our videos. These are all barriers that we put up and tell ourselves these stories to convince us to keep in our comfort zone and not push us very much. So yeah, I think about that story quite often because it did change my life. And I think about that quite often when I meet others who I feel like are about to have something similar happen to them,
It hits home for me because it's such an important topic, this belief system and being able to and learn what you're capable of. And it's interesting because it's something I struggle with as a business leader in the current kind of climate, because there's so much discussion around work-life balance and in office, out of office, and how hard you work and all this stuff. And it takes hard work most often to be really successful. And that is an uncomfortable reality. And it's often at odds with a lot of the rhetoric that people are telling us in society. And don't get me wrong, I'm a dad of 2 kids. I'm heavily involved, coach the soccer team, very involved with, my wife and my home life. Mm-hmm. But I have no illusions of how hard it is to be successful and how much you need to work. And one part I love in that story is you pushed a boundary, and I'm sure you worked your ass off to study for that exam. And it was probably pretty uncomfortable, but you also unlocked this level of performance that you never knew was possible. And it's funny because I talk with a lot of candidates who are hiring, and I say, do you want to do the best work of your career? Come work for us. It won't be super comfortable all the time, but if you're willing to put in the motivation, you will surprise yourself to do things you never thought possible. And this isn't a pitch for later. This is just a fundamental belief system that I have. And it's when you see someone put in the effort and they just go all in, and they have that moment where holy shit, I'm awesome. And I never thought I could do this. It's the most gratifying feeling as a leader, as an employee, as an entrepreneur. And the fact that you could do that for yourself, that's awesome. But I think a lot of people need that, almost personal trainer next to you. You don't know what you're capable of. If you buy into this system, I got you, but you got to put in the work. And so I love what that says about hard work, about personal belief and mental health, because coming out of that, it's like mental health doesn't mean sitting on your couch and relaxing and suddenly that's better. Yes, you need to meditate and relax and take your time, but you really knowing how good Jade can be and what you're capable of is probably like one of the best things for your mental health. And that reassured confidence in that moment. Sorry, I'm ranting on this, but it's so powerful. And I think that is something where true confidence comes from, true capability, true success comes from. Like, that's what I want to teach to my kids, my employees, my spouse, like all my friends, is like, you have no idea what you can go do because you stop short of your potential constantly.
Yeah.
Wow. Scott, that was powerful. But you know what? I think we have an idea for a t-shirt because I love the quote, "Holy shit, I'm amazing."
Yeah. I love it too. You better trademark that.
Yeah, it's such a big, important thing. And I'll reflect on something that happened in my life as well. Like, now we're all sharing stories. I love it. I actually had a moment that went the other direction, but it really forced me to push myself further than I'd ever been. By the time that I got to college to play college soccer, college football, I was only 2 years into playing the sport. I started playing the sport when I was 17. And so I was just not as technically gifted as most players. But I did have a lot of drive and I had a lot of athleticism. I got really lucky. I had a great senior season in high school, and then they got me a scholarship and I went on. But about 2 years into my college career, my coach looked at me. He looked at another player, and I will be honest with you, since we're not throwing out names, this was probably one of the worst coaches I've ever had in my life. He looked at me and he looked at another player and he said, "If he had your speed, he'd be really dangerous. AKA, I'm worthless without my speed. Someone else deserves it." And so that drove me in a really, 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 really big way. I started practicing about 2 hours per day against the wall by myself after practice or before practice, and just kept getting in the motions and rotations and on and on and on and on. And after college, I went on to become a more successful footballer than anybody that I went to college with. I went on to play in Europe. I went on to play in big tournaments, big leagues, and actually lived out a footballing dream that most people would like really want. And that all stemmed from somebody telling me, "You're not good enough," and me telling myself, "Yes, I am." So there's two really important motivations that we take out of things. I think sometimes the positive motivation that we get and reassurance that we get within ourselves when we prove a moment is really big, but there's also other times where someone will tell you that you aren't capable of something. And in order to get over that barrier, you have to be willing to push, be uncomfortable, and put in an unbelievable amount of work to make something happen.
Gosh, such powerful things being said on your podcast. I love it.
All right. But yeah, with that being said, with you being at the degree that you are, with you seeing success and now having a process and being a refined creator, do you think that there's anything that is there one big thing that you've taken away from your creative process that you're like, this is an absolute must. This is something that everybody has to know?
Yeah, it's such a good question because I always feel like there's so many things that come to mind and I'm like, which one is the one that maybe resonates the most? Do you know what I would say actually? Given where we're at in the creative economy where there are so many creators, and I always think that's incredible. The more creators, the more choice we have when it comes to the content we want to consume, and that's a good thing. I think something that a lot of people are struggling with at the moment is like, how do they stand out? Because everyone's making people feel like things are oversaturated and there are too many in your niche and blah, blah, blah. And I don't think any of that's true. It's never too late to start, regardless of what niche you're entering. What's important is you finding a way to stand out. And the way in which you stand out is by showcasing your personality and your own quirks and leaning into them. I'm such a believer of this. If you are someone who, I remember I was working with someone who had she was from the US, she had a really Southern accent, and she was really trying to push me on this because she was like, I think I should like dial it down. And I was like, I think you should dial it up. Like, this is you. This is part of your personality. Like, lean into it. These little things, like, for example, in my YouTube videos, if I have like a gallery wall behind me, whenever I film, I always film in the same place. And I have this running thing with my community where like every summer the photos just gradually start to fall because it gets too hot. It's like a thing. They'll be like, have they started falling yet? And I'm like, no, but it looks like they're on their way out. If it falls in my video, I'll leave it. I'll leave the blooper in. Do you know what I mean? If I spot a spider, I'll leave it in. If I mess up as I speak, I'll leave it in. I mess up phrases all the time. I leave it in. It's now become synonymous with my brand and who I am. And now when I meet creators in real life, they'll like bring up something like that. They'll be like, oh, have you fixed your photo yet? You know, it's something what goes beyond me just teaching you how to do something. And that's what's helping me stand out. And it doesn't even take any time or effort because it's literally just me. And we all have that within us. I think we spend too much time trying to think like, what's our unique selling point? And I'm like, it's literally you. It's inside you already. It doesn't require any additional effort. You know, you just have to let it shine a bit.
I love that. It's funny because we had a very similar conversation, and it's, you know, as a CEO, it's like you're supposed to wear like the blue collared shirt with like the dark blue blazer and don't say anything controversial. And it's like we're really focused this month on our bottom line and, you know, really putting that profitability out, and our customers are our number one priority, and we just love our employees. It's family, you know, and just, I'm like, it's like, you just don't have anything interesting to say. And I feel like that is a problem with school and kind of the system coming up in a lot of early jobs, especially in the corporate world. It's just like, how can we teach everyone to not stand out in, you know, like do good enough, but like, don't be noisy because that's weird, you know? And I, one thing I love about where the world is going is I think you can start to show your personality more. You can start to show you're a normal person. And it is weird for, you know, I think maybe less so in Gen Z, but for sure in millennials, it's like you're unwinding all of this pre-wiring to just like kind of be quiet. And when you say things, say it in a very controlled way. And it's interesting. Like I was in Boston this week and just the amount of like 5'11" pretty fit white dudes with like coiffed hair in business outfits. I was just like, this is so boring. These guys are all just going to some spreadsheet job and it's terrible. And I hope that they figure out who they are and like what they want to do when they grow up. You know, it's just,
yeah.
I don't know. And I think different things for different people, but the world's way more interesting when you have this varied personality, when you let it come out. And like, I don't know. I hope people get some confidence to like show their weird side. I said this it was funny. I remember saying this like 10 years ago. I was like, everyone's weird. It's just how much they let everyone else see it. And like your significant other and your close friends are like the one who get exposed to it. But yeah, it's like, there are a couple like unicorns who are actually that business prototype. And when you meet them, it's amazing. They're like seeing them in the wild is like, that is actually you. Whoa, that's crazy. But like 90% are just trying to fit this mold. And it's way more fun when you get to see who they really are.
Yeah. Do you know what I just want to touch on as well? Something that you mentioned there, like the millennial thing, because it's such a millennial thing, because our exposure to social media when we were younger was like a highly edited version of social media. Like we were on Instagram when it was a filter app. You would upload a photo of your eggs and your bacon from the morning and whack 18 different filters on it so you could barely see what it was anymore. It was just so highly edited. Whereas younger generations are literally growing up in a world where it's like the more raw, authentic, shaky your camera footage is, this FaceTime style content, like the more it's like that, the better. It's like the connections that really are of value to them. Whereas we grew up with aesthetics being of value, and it is a hard thing to teach us to stop doing. You know,
it's like every millennial creator is like, I'm a part-time photographer, part-time editor.
And
it's like they're trying to make this like beautiful Sony like camera ad, and it's like someone's over here with their like 3-generation old phone and they're like million views.
yeah exactly. And they're like incredibly successful. I love variety of content type, especially like in the content quality, right? Maybe not what you're presenting, but what you're, you know, taking it on, what you're capturing it on. Because I think a big part about my difficulties in the beginning of my career as a creator, and I lost out on some deals because of this, was I was so curated throughout my normalcy before I kind of grew a bigger audience.
I used to be very specific about what I'd post. Right. Even used to have like a structure. I would have colored photo, black and white. You know,
That brings me back.
Yeah, you know, I had the grid.
Oh, yeah.
And so I lost out on a lot of deals because I'd have someone reach out to me and they'd want something very like authentic and like literally talk to the camera and I'm like, that's gonna throw off the cadence of my posts. You know? So I genuinely think like the diversity within our posts is something that has become such a cool part about social media and its culture, because you're having people have these very, very beautiful moments where they do capture something that is just like aesthetically pleasing. And it's like, wow, that's really good photography. And then on the next post, you just see them being like, hey, I'm in my bathroom and this is my mirror. And hello, I had a bad day. You know, so I think that's a really cool part about the progression of social media.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I do think it is largely because people are just valuing like the connections with people so much more than they used to. I remember some of the biggest creators back in like, I don't know, 2018 time. Those creators, I did not know anything about them as a person. Could not tell you one thing. I don't even think I knew how they sounded, like what their voices sounded like. I don't think I knew where they were from. I don't know if they had an accent. I had no idea, because all I saw was like photos of themselves and their clothes and their outfits, and that was enough for us back then. But I love that that's not enough for us anymore. Like, I love that we've advanced to being at a point where we just want to connect with people more, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
It is funny because I used to follow a lot of the content on like really high-end photography, because I was like, oh, how do you make beautiful content? And then what I realized, it was like this inception moment where I was like, I'm watching Peter McKinnon, and while it's beautiful, his like personality's everywhere, and he's like making coffee and riding a motorcycle and getting tattoos. And I'm like, I've stopped caring about whatever picture he's taking and whatever camera view he's doing. Like, he's a freaking funny, like, wild dude. And it's like, I'm there for him, not for whatever image he's taking. And I think, yeah, it's interesting. I think even in that old curated world, somehow the inkling of what things would become was there. We just like didn't really see it. And it was like people were trying to put out that high aesthetic, but like we fell in love with their personality even in spite of some of the highly curated stuff, which is interesting. But one thing what you said resonated, and I think in season 2, one of the biggest things we want to do is like have creators walk away with something that they can apply or learn. And you mentioned having a marketing and business background and why it's such a leg up. And I'm like, what are one or two things that you would say, this is a clear distinction of, I have a business and marketing background and therefore I did this and therefore I achieved this, that someone who didn't have that would just be kind of aimlessly wandering or not structured? Or I'm curious, what is that one or two thing that if you were to encourage someone who didn't have that background, like how they could achieve a similar result?
Yeah, for sure. Well, creators who don't have marketing and business backgrounds are usually incredibly good at producing great content and also connecting with their community. It's just that that's usually where it stops. So to take it to the next level and earn a decent income, it actually requires you to, one, quite often take them off platform, have access to their emails, for example, and have an email list so that there's another way for you to speak to them and market to them beyond social media. But then also, and this is the most important part, is to monetize that audience. And that is what people struggle with. For example, in my early days of my journey, so I created an email list. I did like a quiz, I think, as a lead magnet back in the early days. And I did that like month 2 of my journey. So I was getting like 10 to 20 views. And I was like, nope, I've got my email list up. I was starting to embed affiliate links from early because I was like, I'm going to do this now so that when these videos perform well, I don't have to go back and add all the affiliate links. These are already there. I created an ebook by month 3, I think. Again, I had a few hundred people in my audience. I created an ebook because I was looking at my analytics and I could clearly see that the videos which were getting the most traction and the questions I were getting was mostly around entering the influencer space and industry. So I created an ebook where I was pulling back the curtain and explaining what it was and how it worked from someone who'd previously worked on it from the other side, right? So I was doing all these things and making all these decisions and all these moves beyond creating content and connecting with my audience. I was laying the groundwork to be able to monetize the value that I was sharing at some point. And even though in the beginning, I was barely making anything from affiliate links. I think I made a couple £100 when I started selling my ebook. Within a few months, when my content started to take off, which is something that creators don't need help with, they already know how to do the great content. But because I had all these other things set up, suddenly I had a few thousand people on my email list. Suddenly my ebook was making £1,000 a month in passive income. All these things were now happening on the back end because I'd put all of those business and marketing moves in place. And that was what helped me scale so quick. Like that was why within 6 months I was like, cool, done now. This is what I do full time. And that is what I know a lot of people wouldn't have known how to do. That's very much the marketing and business background, you know?
Yeah, I love it when it all comes together. So, you know, as we get closer to the end of this conversation, we have a couple of things that we like to touch on, you know, and I think one of those is a speed round.
Okay.
So hopefully you're ready for this. But I'm going to ask you a this or that, and you just got to tell me really quickly which one and why. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. So TikTok or Instagram?
Instagram, because I am still a millennial at heart and I just cannot move on from that app.
Me too. Video or static post?
I'm going to say video, but specifically like longer landscape. Again, the millennial coming out. I like a long landscape YouTube video. I like to talk. I like to provide context. So that, but if it was between short form and photos, I might pick photos.
Okay. All right. So, all right, now this is a funny one. So, short or, I guess you answered it. Short or long form video?
Long. I like to talk.
Okay.
I don't want to be restricted by time limits.
Yeah. Even though one of your recent posts did say you wish you discovered short form posts a little earlier.
A huge mistake of mine was not to get over that and start sharing short form content earlier than I did. And I share it now, but it's just not my favorite. You know, I make it work because it's the right thing to do and it's the strategic thing to do. But I always love my long videos where I can sit down with a cup of tea and just chat for an hour.
Lovely. All right. Long-term or short-term partnership?
Oh, long-term, 100%. 100%.
Okay. And then story or grid post?
Oh, do you know what? I'm going to say stories at the moment. I'm liking being in my stories. There's so many engagement features. I feel like it triggers so many genuine conversations with people because people are able to DM rather than it being a public comment. So at the moment, I'm preferring stories.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that one before I cut this one off, because I had an interesting, we had our presidential debate here a couple of days ago, and I posted the most basic question in my stories, right? I get, I would say like I average about 10% on engagement, so out of my 460K followers, I get about maybe 46,000 on a good day in my stories. This story post went nuts. I'm pretty sure I got a decent bit of about maybe close to 5,000 DMs.
Oh my gosh.
And yes, and I got 100,000 plus overall engagement in terms of viewership. It was nuts. And it was just a question in the stories about, hey, how are y'all enjoying this debate? So stories have definitely climbed up in my like hierarchy of things lately as well.
Wow. Well, you know what? I've noticed I was doing like a project recently where I was analyzing a few huge creators and looking at their engagement and blah, blah, blah. And I noticed that some of the biggest creators, a lot of their engagement is in their stories. And that is often one of their most valuable pieces of advertising inventory. Like the amount of creators I see who are at your level, who will share something and within seconds, whatever they've shared is sold out. Like it is fascinating. And I think because stories facilitates such an easy process for you to see whatever you're talking about, to actually go ahead and buy it, or hear whatever you're talking about and then respond to you so quickly. I think because that barrier isn't there and it's just easier to do those two things, it's more connected, I think it triggers a lot more engagement for people. So it surprises me because those numbers are wild, but also doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when we look at all these things and we try to project or predict the future, we never can, but there's things that we want to try to see if we can figure out, right? When it comes to you and, the next few parts of your journey, a couple questions that I want to ask, and I think Scott would want to know as well is, do you have any dream partnerships that, if they knocked on your door today, you would be like, oh my gosh, freaking out, so happy about?
Yes. However, then they don't link with my content yet. So a lot of the brands who I work with, I think I've been very fortunate actually. So far, the brands who are directly linked to my content, my favorite ones I have worked with. So I feel like there is a relationship there. I think that's a benefit from being so niched down as well and starting when I did, right? But there are other brands like Adidas, for example, is one of my favorite brands in the entire world. For my entire life, I have loved Adidas amongst so many other brands. And like, I really love fashion as well. Doesn't come into my content very often, but I love fashion. So there are so many brands down that avenue who I'd absolutely love to work with. But right now, it just wouldn't make sense. But I do think at some point in the future, it would. It's a little hint. I think some point in the future, it would make sense. But right now, it doesn't.
You heard that, folks. You heard it here
first. So I'm curious, what's next for you? What's next in your kind of journey? Do you have some big plans on the horizon, new content, new angles? Not to divulge some, your new emerging fashion and beauty creator life, but
I know that I really made it sound like I was gonna rebrand completely. I'm not gonna rebrand completely, but
hey, it's Jake, get ready with me.
Yeah. I'm just with no explanation, I'm just going to completely change my strategy. Can you imagine? No, well, I am working on a content series, which I'm really, really excited about. I can't tell you too much, but it is still in my space. It's still focusing on the creator economy, but it is more documentary style. I've got an incredible production team on board to help me out. Hopefully we'll take it to the US in a couple of years or so to do some stuff over there as well. So that's really exciting. I've literally been working on that since the start of this year. So it's a really big project and hopefully you will start to see some content from it at the start of next year. So that's the main thing that I'm working on amongst a few different events and small things going on there.
It's awesome.
Amazing. Yeah. So, two things. Do you have any cool events coming up that you think that, creators should be at? I myself am actually going to be in London at Creator Fest October 24th.
Nice.
And so I'm excited about that. Do you have any events that you think creators should be at in the next few months?
There is an event with a company called Uscreen. I can't remember what they've named the event, but that's happening on November 8th, which hopefully I will be attending and maybe doing a talk, which would be good as well. And I think the other events that I've currently got on my calendar are literally next week. So I don't think it would be worth mentioning those. They're probably too soon. And they're also in New York, so they're not even near where I live anyway. But yeah, I think maybe keep a lookout for that one. I think Creator Fest will be really great as well. And yeah, that's probably it.
Are you going to digital marketing in New York?
No, I'm going.
Oh, okay,
is that
we're
what you're going to next year? Oh, yeah, next week.
Next week. I was like, are we going to the same place?
No, I'm going. There's a couple of YouTube events going on. So I'm going to a couple of those. But how funny. I feel like there are a lot of creators. Obviously, it was New York Fashion Week as well, isn't there? There's a lot of creators in New York over the coming weeks, which is exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a little sad I missed out on Fashion Week. I made a deal with my wife. I could either go to Fashion Week or Burning Man, and I chose Burning Man.
Oh, so. That's fair though. I think that's a fair choice. I've done the same thing.
So as we wrap up today, Jade, is there anything more that you want our audience to know? Any final words, any final takeaways?
Yeah, I think one thing that I would say, maybe just to close things off, is whatever it is that you're focusing on in terms of your content creation career, just make sure that you're finding enjoyment in it. I think the main reason why people end up not achieving their goals is because they quit. And the main reason why you end up quitting is because what you're doing, you're not genuinely enjoying. So don't pick niches because you think they're going to give you the most financial fulfillment. Pick things because you genuinely love them. That is going to be the thing what helps you stick with it. It's got to be the thing which means that you don't quit too early. And that is what's going to lead you to success eventually.
I love that. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on. Everyone check out Jade's content on YouTube, on Instagram. Great insights today. I feel like I'm fired up. I'm motivated to get my day started. So thanks for joining us, and everyone will see you on the next podcast. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.